Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Joining us here on the program today is someone who had an incredible life-changing experience. He is someone who is part of the oldest and largest lumber company in America that was founded by his family in 1848. Today he's going to share his vision quest for a visionary way that people can actually see and experience life that he learned through the Lakota Sioux tribe. And he's going to be sharing that with us today, and we'll learn how about growing connection and affection for the long-suffering but resilient Lakota Indian tribe, what they taught him about human relationships to the land, animals, nature, and spirit. It also shares how he unyoked himself from his sole leadership role to create a shared responsibility that resulted in a record profit for his company, and a feature in the New York Times showcasing his new leadership model. I'd like to welcome to Beyond 50 radio program today our guest and author of the book Not for Sale, Finding Center in the Land of Crazy Horse, our guest, Kevin Hancock. Kevin, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Daniel, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Now, this was an interesting story. I didn't get the opportunity to get the book, but as I was looking over the notes here, I was really kind of astounded about how you kind of came into a life purpose that was really life-changing for you, wasn't it?
It sure was. In the last 5 or 6 years, I've had a bunch of things come into my life that I never would have saw coming, all of which changed me in a pretty profound way, yes.
Now, how did someone from Maine come to find himself spending time in the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation?
Well, that's a great question. That's the first sentence of my book. I was standing at the Wounded Knee Massacre site on the reservation the day before Halloween 2012, and an old jewelry maker pulled up and rolled down her window and said, "What brings you here?" That's the story of my book. The kind of the short version of that story is in 2010, at the peak of the housing and mortgage market collapse, I was running a lumber company here in Maine, Hancock Lumber, and I began, Daniel, to have trouble speaking. When I went to talk, all the muscles in my throat would spasm and squeeze and contract, and my voice could get very broken and weak and hard to hear. And for me, it was a bit painful, and it left me dizzy and out of breath and not wanting to say very much. And so I ended up learning quite a few leadership lessons from not being able to talk, having to do a lot more listening, which worked really, really well, and sharing power more broadly and inviting everyone else to lead. And then by 2012, the economy had stabilized, and I could see our company was well on its way to being healthy as well. And I had a growing feeling that I needed to spend a little more time on myself. It had been a really long period of kind of fighting and working to help take care of the company and everyone else. And I ended up getting a chance to go to the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, one of the biggest, poorest, most historic Indian reservations in America. And one trip became 2, then 3, which has now become 9, and a journal I was keeping about my experiences there became a book.
Now, tell us what was special about this place and, about the Pine Ridge Reservation that makes it so unique and important.
So in the summer of 2012, what first got me on to their community, I had picked up a copy of National Geographic, and their reservation was on the cover, and I read the article about the history of their tribe and the modern-day challenges of their community. And Daniel, it was as if every kind of soul and character who'd ever been a part of that story on behalf of Sue came out of that magazine and grabbed me and pulled me in to the story. And I finished the article without any more thought than this. It said to my wife, I want to go there. I want to see what modern day life is like. And so I did, and things unfolded from there. But also to your question, Pine Ridge is, if you pay attention to Indian reservations on the plains, it's probably the poster child. It's the biggest, most remote, perhaps the most historic, and poorest of all the Sioux reservations on the northern plains.
Now, it's really tremendous to consider the resilience this place has had. Tell us about that and the spirit of the people that are there today.
Yeah, no, you're right. The resiliency of the people is a incredible story. The fact that their culture even survived against generation after generation of systematic oppression and work on behalf of our government to remake them as white people. The fact that their community is still there, that their language is intact, is an amazing story in and of itself. And the people there are, they're lovely. They're irresistible, I think is what I would say. They're warm, kind, friendly, proud, courageous, resilient people, and they really ended up, the people I met there really ended up making me feel so welcome in their community.
I remember a time there was a wonderful movie called Last of the Dogmen starring Tom Berenger and also Barbara Hershey, who was an anthropologist, and she studied the Native American tribes of North America. And they had ended up being captured by a Lakota Sioux tribe that nobody knew was in the areas of the deep Montana. And it was interesting because while he was tied up, he was kind of curious about what they were going to do. And she says, well, we'll probably just get absorbed into the tribe. And he says, what do you mean absorbed? He says, well, generally anybody who was caught prisoner by the Lakota Sioux was generally let go, and they were treated so well as prisoners that they often didn't leave the tribe even if they were allowed to. And what was your experience like with something like being with them?
Yeah, well, I think the simplest way I would put it is people are people. They're human beings, just like everybody else that you or I or your listeners know. And we've somehow on this planet convinced ourselves that different cultures or races or communities are different, are not like us, but at the end of the day, we're all humans sharing a single planet. So at the most basic level, they're just people. They're no different than anybody else you've met or know, albeit their experiences, their history, and their current economic conditions are quite different, quite challenged.
Now, it's interesting that you have the title Not for Sale. Tell us how that came to become the title.
Yeah, I've had some fun with that, and I've had to explain it at times, Daniel, because some people will look at the book and say, oh, that's so nice of you, Kevin, your book is free. And then I feel bad, and I have to explain that it's not free. It actually is for sale. But the title has two meanings. First, for the Sioux, in around the 1930s, they began filing a series government for the taking of their land. And as you might imagine, their suits were defeated and thrown out of court and so forth for years, but they never quit. And in 1980, they ended up before the United States Supreme Court in a very famous case, and they won. The Supreme Court sided with the Sioux and stated that back in the 1870s, the federal government had violated their Fifth Amendment rights by taking their land without just compensation. So the court then went back and calculated the value of the land, compounded the interest to the present day, and awarded the Sioux the money. But the Sioux came back to the podium before the court, if you will, and said, "No, Your Honor, sorry, you don't understand. Our land is not for sale," and they won't take the money. It sits in trust to this day and is now valued at over $1 billion. So that was half of the purpose of the title. The other half of the purpose of the title connected to me as a business executive, kind of right in the middle of his career. I was probably 46 or 7 at the time. I came to realize that I, too, was not for sale, and what that meant to me was I was not willing to be defined just as a business person, and I was not willing to have all of my energy be consumed by that exercise, which it easily could. I love my job, love my company, take a lot of pride in it, but I wanted to define myself more broadly, which in this case was reaching out, spending time with the people of Pine Ridge, and being an author, being a photographer, being a storyteller, and a bit of an activist on their behalf. So I, too, was not for sale.
Now, what's interesting is that you talk about a thing known as evolutionary astrology and how that played an important role in your book and your story. So let's talk about what that is and how you came to be connected with its teachings.
Yeah, that was something else that I did not see coming into my life. I'd never heard of spasmodic dysphonia, the voice disorder I'd acquired, and I'd never heard of evolutionary astrology. A few years before I acquired my voice disorder, I somewhat randomly had a evolutionary astrology reading done by a woman that I'd never met from Palo Alto, California, and evolutionary astrology is quite interesting. It's founded in 3 basic tenets. First, that everything that lives, has lived, or shall live is connected. It's related. It's all made up of the same stardust or sacred energy, if you will. The second tenet is that energy has a mission or a purpose. It wants to evolve. It wants to learn, grow, and evolve over time. The third principle, which was the bigger leap at the time for me, but I've made it, is that as to humans, the soul is the being, and the body is a vessel, if you will, and that souls have multiple incarnations across time for the purpose of evolving, learning lessons, and growing. And in this reading, this woman I'd never met was describing my past life energies and lessons in which I had inherited leadership responsibility for a tribe, not unlike what happened to me in my family business in this lifetime, and that that under duress I'd been quite dogmatic about my leadership style, and that there were some pretty significant wounds that came with me into this lifetime, and that I had essentially come here this time to try to learn some of the lessons I didn't quite get right last time. And then, ironically, a few years later, I lost my voice, which really forced me to become a very different leader who got very, very good at listening. So when I put those two things together, the reading and then the loss of my voice, and then connecting third with this tribe in the Dakotas where nobody felt like they had a voice, I came to believe that there was a purpose or an opportunity in me losing my voice, and that was twofold: to connect more deeply with my own soul, kind of the essence of who I was outside of my very public roles, and then second, at my own company and at places like Pine Ridge, to do what I could to be the champion of strengthening the voices of others, especially people who don't always feel heard, like workers in a company can feel at times, or the people at Pine Ridge definitely felt. And so my book really follows that theme and thinks differently about leadership and the future of leadership.
Now, leadership's a tricky and interesting thing all at once. I agree with what you're saying when it comes to a leadership that tends to listen, and what's fascinating, especially about Native American tribes of North America, is you usually hear they only talk with intention. So they don't say very much, because what they say is, as you were saying earlier about energy, it has that energetic tone. In other words, speaking is a life force of its own. When you take a look at America, especially our entertainment-driven society, you sense a certain, like a shell of intention. It's not really there. It's an illusion that somebody else is creating, and it's kind of like having plastic toys. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Well, I think that's so true, Daniel, and those are great points. I'm really glad you said what you said first at Pine Ridge. I have totally experienced what you speak to. So conversation with people at Pine Ridge is lovingly refreshing, because there are long periods of silence. And I learned pretty quickly at Pine Ridge to go with that here, in the kind of the normal world I live in. I think we become afraid of silence. You watch a conversation today, and if it goes quiet for just a few seconds, someone will get nervous, jump in and fill it, and start talking. So I learned at Pine Ridge that people thought before they spoke and were quiet often right in the middle of the conversation. And then second, and this is why I chose to share my book and do the extra work of being on shows like yours to try to spread the story, is I really came to believe that I had been afforded a learning opportunity about the future of leadership and leading differently at a time when our planet critically needed to start thinking differently about talking, listening, intimidating, and leading.
It's interesting, too, because you talk in your book about that you transcend business and the idea of bigger, better, more. You're always hearing, somebody's always got a plan out there for continued growth. But in truth, that isn't really the way the natural world works, and it's not possible to apply natural laws into the world, let's say, of business, and expect it to work the way we think it will. In other words, controlling it. And this is something that I know the Lakota Sioux were very big about. It's about working with and cooperating with with nature and the natural world. I mean, they really deeply understood natural laws.
Yeah, and I think the key word there, again, a great point. I think the key word, Daniel, is balance. That any system, any tribe, or any individual needs balance. And one of the themes I experienced and deal with at length in my book is the idea that many of us have lost our balance in a 24/7 go, 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 internet wired, constant connectivity, bigger, better, more world. And that you could spend an entire life or a career being busy, being productive, but not necessarily living. And as I say now, I came to give up the business notion of global conquest, that we're going to conquer the world, which doesn't mean you can't still be proud and competitive and aggressive and want to do a good job. We want to do all of those things, but I want to do it in a balanced way for the people that work at our company, including myself, so that the work is part of who we are, but doesn't overstep its balance and take up too much time, energy, and opportunity to explore other things. You know, I easily could have just kept totally focused on just the work and never have gone to Pine Ridge, never have connected to them, never wrote a book, never shared a story. And what I saw was restoring more balance in my own life didn't make me poorer at my job. It actually made me better at my job. When we put balance in our lives, I think we can't help but glow a bit brighter and actually become more valuable in all aspects of our lives to those around us.
You know, I was just thinking about all of this as you can step back and look at a bigger context of the situation, especially as your book chronicles 6 trips to Pine Ridge, as I understand. But it must have been really interesting that in your business and social circle of influence, that community that you were used to, that you grew, you developed into, that includes the business community as well as your own social community. As you began to change, I'm sure it was subtle to the point that you probably didn't notice it at first. Yet, as you're in your communities, I'm sure people must have experienced changes in you that I would almost hazard a guess made some probably very, very nervous or unsettled.
Yeah, all of that. To some degree, the change was fairly dramatic fairly quickly because it really kicked in, Daniel, when I lost my voice, the consistent use of my voice. I had to lead differently because I couldn't talk all the time. But then I think it really accelerated or found its meaning when I started traveling to Pine Ridge in what I've come to consider was really a modern-day vision quest experience, if you will. And I do remember being really nervous about what other people would think, that I was leaving, you know, several times a year from my job and my home to go spend a week or more at Pine Ridge, because I felt people, it's not what you'd expect the CEO of a company to be doing. So it was risky and made me nervous, but the attraction of what I was learning or experiencing was so powerful that I couldn't stop going. And I soon came to see that people really respected what I was doing, why I was doing it, and saw how it was changing the way I led and changing our organization and ultimately people embraced it. So I worried about it, but in hindsight, I didn't really have to.
There's so much to cover here, and I think it's a wonderful story. And I was wondering, as you've had this book get out there, how have people responded to what you've put out there?
They've responded really, really favorably overall. So the book ended up winning. It's now won 2 national independent book awards. But what's most important to me is that people who read the book, many, many people all over the world will track me down, find me, just to say thank you or to tell me how powerful the book was for them. And I believe that's the case because the themes that I experienced and then shared in a really candid way are universally human themes. Someone asked me, I joke, one of the most common questions I get asked, as you might imagine, is someone will say, what's your book about? And that's the hardest question to answer. But I had a woman at a talk I gave give the answer. She said, no, Kevin, I know what your book's about. It's simple. Your book is about healing. It's about healing on an individual soul level. And that is a universally human experience that at multiple times in a life we all go through, but we're taught to kind of keep that hidden or personal, to bury those wounds, if you will. And I put my whole story out there, and I found that others who are also healing or searching for their voice, if you will, appreciated someone else sharing that kind of experience so candidly and openly and innocently.
I think you discovered the power of myth.
Yes.
Certainly you can hear ringtones of Joseph Campbell saying something like,
yes,
this is the hero's journey. And it may not seem like you're slaying dragons or monsters, but look, healing and forgiveness is a bigger monster that most of us dare tread to face.
No, and again, it's so, it made me numb or gave me goosebumps when I discovered Joseph Campbell, because I'd written the book before I found him. I was telling a dear friend about the book right before it published, and he said, Daniel, oh, that's Joseph Campbell. That's the hero's journey. So I went home and Googled Joseph Campbell. I didn't even know about him. And when I saw that universal mythological human story of initiation, something's taken or lost from us, like in this case, my voice, separation, you leave to try to regain what was lost, and perhaps come back with more than what you lost in the first place, and then return, coming back to your tribe and trying to incorporate what you learn. And also that famous Joseph Campbell quote, we are the truth we seek to know, and that all of mythology and religion across time and across cultures was a metaphor for connecting with who we are at a soul's level, and that the journey, it comes by turning inward and looking deep within ourselves for our own truth and our own path.
Fascinating stuff. It's so wonderful to have something like this out there for the listeners. The book is called Not for Sale, Finding Center in the Land of Crazy Horse. Our guest today, Kevin Hancock. Kevin, do you have a website people can visit and find out more about you and your book and things like that? We
do, thank you. So the book website is www.kevindhancock.com. Kevin D is in David, Hancock.com. And there are lots of resources on that website, and you can also purchase the book there. And one advantage of buying the book on that website is that I see those orders, so you can communicate with me, and I sign all of those books personally.
Well, there you go. It doesn't get any better than that. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today. What a wonderful story.
I'm really happy you had me. Great job with everything you do and the program, and thank you for having me.
Well, we try to do it with intention. Thanks again, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for sharing and joining us here. You can also discover more by visiting us at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter. That way you can stay up to date on what's going on in the Beyond 50 community and upcoming shows as well. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Beyond 50 Radio. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.